Hey you guys, I wanted to come on here and give commentary on everything going on so far surrounding the protests, the riots, the looting, etc. Now obviously this is a very cataclysmic time and we know all of this occurred from the murder of George Floyd. Black people for centuries have been in a near perpetual state of oppression, with their people incessantly facing mistreatment, being denied basic human rights and resources, and overall subjugation. And as you all know, with the unfortunate lynching of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Black people for so long have tried to do things the right way. We've tried voting, we tried praying, we tried to go about doing things the legal way, and there are so many paths you can take before having to go down a path of destruction and devastation. I also want to say this: do those who benefit from your oppression hear you? Of course they do. I keep seeing this generalized statement and or response where it seems like people are saying things like our voices deserve to be heard or use your voice. And to that I say, what do you think our ancestors have been doing this whole time? What do you think they were doing during the Civil Rights Movement? What do you think that they did during the Haitian Revolution? What do you think the countries in Africa were doing? And what do you think Cuba was doing? Say all that to say that they hear you. They hear you loud and clear. But the thing about it is that they don't care. They understand that Black people, when it comes to any form of an uprising, they're not capable of doing so because of our deficiency in unification. They also understand that Black people are exceptionally susceptible to divide and conquer tactics, which further contributes to the inadequacies we face when it comes time to form a one-track mind. And this also accounts for why you see a multitude of deferring responses from Black people on social media. I'm sure you guys have also noticed social discussions where you have some Black people expressing their dismay and dissatisfaction with other Black people's actions during this revolutionary period. I guess revolutionary-esque would be more appropriate, given that this is technically not a real revolution in my opinion. I think the real revolution will look entirely different than this. This is just a guess, but I think it will happen when a good portion of Black people become unchained and do to them what their oppressors have done to them for the past 400 years. There are also other Black people that are in favor of other counterparts' current antics in these same social spaces, which creates tension, animosity, and division, which cements my point about a deficiency and seemingly impossible approach towards unison. And I understand that due to our historical anguish and past struggles, we do what's necessary and crucial for survival purposes. And this is why we believe in doing things the way that our oppressors say we should do things, because we have instilled in our minds through conditioning that insubordination or any form of defiance is met with chastisement and castigation. Now, I want to address this, and this is something that I feel I have to keep saying because repetition is the best teacher. And since a lot of our people think with a childlike mentality, maybe this will help to deconstruct and debunk some accepted propaganda. Well, I believe you should vote. I'm not going to tell you that you should. It's entirely up to you. I just think you should vote by researching who it is you're voting for. And see, our people are politically ignorant when it comes to voting. We believe that Republicans are against us by default. And so by that same logic, we vote for Democrats, not even realizing that they too have hidden agendas and motives that are not revealed until when one of them takes presidency. And this whole scare tactic that Black people try and use by saying things like, oh, well, if you don't vote Joe, it's another 4 years of Trump. That is so cliche and typical that it almost becomes comical at a certain point, because realistically, none of these presidential candidates have done anything for the Black community. Each time one of them gets into a race for presidency, the candidate will behave in a stereotypical way. They'll do things like imitate or mimic something from what they perceive as Black culture, like a dance, something like the nay-nay, eating greens with hot sauce, saying you ain't Black if you don't vote for me, the whole nine, what Joe Biden said just recently. And because Black people think with their emotions rather than logic, they fall for this foolishness each time, and other communities don't respond in that way. I also have this annoying tendency to view situations symbolically, as if doing these things are going to help elevate or uplift your community, and when it doesn't turn out in our favor, we're left sitting there looking stupid, and that BS is ridiculous. Voting for Joe Biden is just as bad as voting for Trump, and I'm going to tell you guys why. I did the research on him, since that's another issue we have, is not taking time to look up who we're voting for as long as they're blue. Did you guys know that he and Bill Clinton are directly responsible for the crime bill that was implemented during the early 1990s? And this was a bill that actually disproportionately affected Black Americans the most due to its strict and harsh criteria. And it's also where the 3 strike laws come into play. This acts as a form of oppression because it aligns in the realm of mass incarceration, to which Black people suffer the most from. And as it pertains to this situation with George Floyd and social media's response to the situation, saying to make sure you're at the polls in November, I would say to that, is it going to effectively rid this country of racial and systemic oppression? I think we forget that this system is not just limited to the criminal justice system and law enforcement. So the bigger question we should probably be asking ourselves is, will any of these candidates work effortlessly to disband this current system that we live in? Do I really need to tell you guys the answer to that one? No. I also want to address something else that disturbed me upon my return to social media, because I did take a brief hiatus, but I am seeing a Black man actually going around in some of these videos and protests giving out these free hugs, and I just had to shake my head in disappointment, because I do believe that Black people within their unique biology have something called epigenetics. And if you guys are subscribed to me on my YouTube channel, then you've heard me mention this before, but it's basically the memories and experiences passed down generation to generation through DNA coding sequences, which is why we oftentimes have certain behaviors and natures expressed in our people today. And we also need to state one obvious fact, that some of our people are victims of Stockholm Syndrome, which is when a victim has sympathy or remorse for the ones who have caused them harm. And I'm willing to take a wild guess and say that this Black man may or may not have been aware of that. But just think about it for a minute, you guys. Go back to the time of slavery and think about how some of the Black people enslaved would actually have contrition for their slave masters. When you fast forward and come back to 2020 and look at this Black man hugging the runaway slave patrol, aka the police, do you not see the correlation there? George Floyd was murdered by this same organization. So by engaging in this compassionate action, it almost in a sense diminishes the inequities and inequalities your people have experienced, because you feel the need to hug the love into people. And I really don't see too many individuals doing that, behaving in this manner, especially if their people are harmed unjustly. And this is an unnatural, abnormal, and dysfunctional mentality to be in possession of. And it's blatantly symptomatic of a pathology, a very toxic one at that, that's been one of the reasons why we're in the predicament we're in today. And not the main reason, but just of many. And I really do believe that a lot more of us may be just like him. Not in this exact way, but subconsciously we are subservient to an oppressive race of people for biological purposes, such as survival and preservation. And let me explain to you, or expound what I mean by that, which brings me to my next point. This passive approach, condemnation of other Black people on social media in response to the riots and the looting, the faction of Black people that are spewing this rhetoric saying, oh, I don't think we should have to go that far, or we don't need to showcase violence in order to make a point. These type of talking points are oftentimes reinforced through various methods of social engineering to Black people, because through this mechanism, Black people are not only receptive to this, but we take on those same talking points, which is why some Black people are on the same accord with their oppressors. If your people have been the subject of maltreatment and ill treatment, and you pretty much have tried every other way, then what do you have left? The Black people that are in favor of peaceful protests actually cause more of a hindrance than benefit, because we've already tried protesting peacefully. Martin Luther King was in favor of peaceful protests, and our ancestors did this as well when we were given permission to vote from our oppressors. And side note, but you guys should really side-eye that notion to that this was a right given to you by the very ones who oppress you. And don't think too long on that one, but when you have tried that same method for years and years and years, at what point do you stop and think there has to be some other method we have not tried yet? And praying isn't doing that. Voting is ineffective at this point, because I really don't see Biden dismantling the system either. If anything, he may incentivize callous consequences for rebellion, but even when we try civilized actions, especially peaceful protesting, that doesn't really do anything. In fact, the oppressors probably look at that like, well, as long as they're quiet, they can stay. And they don't really take you guys seriously as a threat, and why should they? You don't give them reason to feel uncomfortable. So as long as you continue to be complacent in the exact same approach, they're not going to take you seriously, and your conditions will remain for centuries to come, which will affect your children, grandchildren, and this subjugation will not go away anytime soon. And you guys, if this sounds familiar, it's because that's the exact same situation we're in right now. And I even saw a video where a black man, he was about age 31. He had a 15-year-old son, and he was talking to a black man age 45, I want to say. They were both like yelling at each other, going back and forth. The 31-year-old black man was praised because the way that I perceived his actions was that he was fine if we continued our passive and docile nature behavior of just pleading and begging, as opposed to the 45-year-old's response where he was actually in favor of the current actions thing. Of course, tranquil actions and quietness will be praised because it maintains the order of white compliance, and as long as you scream or whatever but don't break anything, they don't care about that, so that's fine. When the situation turns more physical, then it becomes a problem because then it disrupts their businesses, and when businesses are disrupted, monetary activities cannot continue, therefore it becomes a problem for them. So listen to what I said again. It becomes a problem for them. And so it in essence becomes a problem due to the inability to proceed with operations that brings them their money. Money that doesn't come into your community. It goes into their community. And it's extremely odd and unusual our response to other black people that are taking a different approach. If I didn't know any better, I'd say some of you guys are perfectly fine with just being integrated, not liberated. But that's a conversation for another time. I don't even think you guys are really ready for that one. The second to last point I want to make is something that some of you pointed out to me, and I find it very interesting, is that there are reports of men dressed in black going around. They're basically doing things like starting riots by breaking the glass of buildings, throwing objects into buildings. I guess for why this is happening is to add to the already convoluted narrative that black people are aggressive and violent, because we know that black people have these negative connotations attached to them, despite the fact that we're the most forgiving and passive people on this planet. And I find it so ironic that non-black people also happen to be looting these stores, yet somehow I keep seeing that it's us who are accepting accountability for these occurrences. So that's also another thing you guys should think about. But to wrap this up, I'm lastly just going to state this very obvious point. When you are dealing with century-long battles of pain, hurt, abuse, coercion, tyranny, and domination by a group of people with savage morality and mentality, you do what you feel is best for your people. And all I'm saying is some of y'all might need to get angry. Angry is good because for far too long, you've pretended to be happy to satisfy the ones who control you. And imagine what would happen if more of us developed a savage-like mentality. So let me know your thoughts on this. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, share the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.